we have to put a context and make sure that people understand exactly what are the limits of these numbers. This is something that has to be done carefully, and it's probably where the communications and exchange with decision makers and stakeholders become very important, because they return to you advices on the impact of saying this and that if you don't put this context, and so that's probably a good idea to pay attention to this.
Okay. Robert, do you want to?
Sure. Yeah, Rob Hughes, I can give a bit of a comment from the point of view of the provincial government here. Generally, just to say, these kinds of products are very useful, very valuable to us, and we have a certain number of experts in the region in some of these areas, but we can't cover all of it thoroughly, so we do rely on expertise from elsewhere to give guidance for management. And what we've seen now a couple of years working in this adaptation area, there's quite a hunger for guidance there on the part of people who are making decisions and managing lands and so on, and planning projects. And so there's a great deal of power in this information. Especially, it's put out there, and then as a provincial government, we can then refer to that and use that and provide guidance to people who are doing planning. And we're seeing that, they're very willing and ready to act on it. Engineering community, this is what they're in the numbers game. If they have good numbers, reliable numbers, they will use them. In terms of the content, I'm pretty confident that most of the main things that concern us are going to be in there. We talked a bit about the sea level rise. I mean, the sea level rise estimates are very central, obviously, and it is tricky. Right now, your slide there, you had the three blocks on the chart, and it is quite a challenge. We're working now with people in the planning infrastructure, 7,500-year design life. There's quite a shift in those numbers, and so we have to turn science into policy. That's what government has to do. Right now, we're using those Ramsdorff numbers. Essentially, is what the guidance we're giving at the moment. And so you look at the chart and you look at that, so there's another whole jump maybe coming. So we have to collectively interpret that and somehow provide guidance again. And whether we shift at this point or not, we'll have to see what the assessment says there. The sea level rise is very important. Ice behaviour predictions for that are very important in this area in terms of effects on erosion. Again, erosion is one of the main things to have guidance about for the coasts. And as a regulator, we're under tremendous pressure there for development, as everybody knows, in the coastal area. So whatever it is that we come forward and recommend, we have to be willing and able to back that up quite strongly, because we'll get a lot of pushback on who we are. So it's back to the authoritative value of these assessments, and so that we're ready to take a stand and say, okay, this is the new coastal zone now, in the next 100 years, that we can make that stand up, because we will get challenges. And they'll probably, we're anticipating legal challenges, that's getting quite close, I think, now. There's a lot of money riding on the value of these coastal lands. Apart from just the static sea level, the dynamic considerations, the wave effects, so far, it's starting. There are studies going on giving us information about that. I've seen that hasn't had enough attention, so there'll be more detail in there about that effect. And then the secondary effects are ecological effects, coastal wetlands, what's changing there. We do have, most of the provinces have pretty good systems in place for regulating wetlands, and the extent of wetlands is obviously changing. So that whole area of conservation and defining land use in the coastal area, I think, is under a lot of scrutiny. And so hopefully there'll be information in there about that as well. I think the basics will be in there, so it will be useful.
Just for Jean-Pierre's elucidation yesterday, there was a number of conversations around development in the coastal zone between ACOA, Gail from ACOA, and Robert Capozzi, and the kinds of pressures, or whether there's sufficient due diligence involved with some economic development issues. in terms of whether certain coastal development should go ahead. Robert had mentioned that even their own economic development agencies were coming forward with plans for significant developments in the coastal zone that were clearly inappropriate. And so there's a sort of whole, I guess, education process, if nothing else, in terms of economic development agencies in the coastal zone that are, trying to take clearly, that's an asset that Atlantic Canada has, is its coasts. But how to exploit that asset appropriately and in a timeline that is compatible with the change that we're about to see, and that's going to be a challenge, I think. So this is still working. It's telling me it needs to change batteries, but it sounds still good, so we'll keep going. So, Sean?
All right, I'll talk fast. I know some of the folks from the government of Nova Scotia participated in the was it the first workshop, or there was a workshop that you had the picture up there, and there were several familiar faces there. Certainly, we would see this as being something that would give broad guidance, especially around what we're trying to do in Nova Scotia in terms of setting coastal development standards, possibly working towards setbacks in the future. And we've already done some work looking at buffers and setbacks and what those could look like, and sort of a process for moving forward into the future with defining some of those standards at a provincial level, or providing capacity to municipal units so that they can work on those. So I would see this as being something that would provide, again, some of that good information that our climate change directorate could then use. That's really the hub that we would use to then define for the government of Nova Scotia, what numbers will we be using. But it does get at some of the issues to do with deciding on the number that our government or the range of numbers that our government is going to use in defining whatever our specific policies, land use policies, setbacks, whatever they would be, One other thing that I like the idea of using case studies, because obviously if it's a project looking at all of Canada, but it is good to have some very specific local level case studies. I saw Halifax Harbour. Halifax was there, and that's great. But I think it's important to have some case studies for places where much smaller amounts of resources were used to get the information. Huge amounts of money has gone into the work around Halifax Harbour. So just making sure that there's a range, because not everyone can do the type of work that was done around Halifax Harbour. There just aren't the resources to do that. So making sure that smaller communities would be reflected in the case studies. Because there's a lot of work that was done, especially through the RAC process, with some of the communities that maybe didn't have as much in the way of resources to carry out that work. So just make sure it's that range is reflected. But it looks like a great project, and we look forward to 2014 and participating in whatever we can over the next 2 years.
Vlad?
Thank you. I don't think I can offer any additional help, because Gavin Manson and Don Forbes are involved in this already. These are two of our people. They're providing the best knowledge and advice to the whole process, as well as data. So just to update what I said yesterday, they are refining the Canadian coastline based on the best available information from CanCo's database, CanVac database, and that comes from a massive amount of topo sheets. They ground truthed by radar sat data and by all kinds of remote sensing information. So I certainly hope that this process will achieve its goals, and it's a really meaningful exercise.
I don't think I've got much to offer either. I'm actually here from the other point of view to try to get direction. I don't speak on policy for the Department of Fisheries notions. Rather, I'm a research scientist, and what I'm looking for, I've been told that more of my life is going to be about climate change adaptation and doing research that's relevant to that. And so, I mean, some of the things that I'm directly interested in are estuaries. You raised the question of which of the coastal areas are contributing most to our fisheries. And we know that estuaries are one of the big areas. And so I'm very interested in estuaries as they contribute to fisheries, but also what climate change impacts are going to be on the estuaries. DFO and Environment Canada have Northumberland Strait as one of their areas for research focus over the next years. We raised the issue of scallops and the fact that temperatures are, even at the bottom of Northumberland Strait now, at a lethal level for scallops, and so we may be losing the scallop fishery. There's been some research that's been done through the Ecosystem Research Initiative, which has shown that the fish community has changed in Northumberland Strait, and the assemblages of fish have changed, maybe through trophic cascade, maybe through loss of major predators, but there's also the question of whether climate change, temperature regimes, and others have been responsible for that. So that's an issue. Specific things, we've done some research on coastal armoring. We were asked by small craft harbors whether breakwaters provide the same habitat for animals as do natural rocky shores, and the answer is they don't. We'll be doing more research on that because there's going to be more coastal armoring, as you point out. Acidification, it was raised that acidification is an issue for the offshore, but it's actually also an issue for the nearshore. There's been some research showing that the acidification levels predicted for 2100 will in fact change the way lobster larvae develop and the time it takes them to get through their different developmental stages, and that may have major implications for the lobster fishery, and that's a nearshore issue. And finally, just basic coastal ecology. There's been some nice work done in the Southern Gulf of St. Lawrence recently asking the question, what structures the intertidal biota, the animals and plants you find in the intertidal zone? And ice scour is a major one. So if we see that change, we'll also see a lot of the coastal ecology change.
My name is Margot Shepherd, and I I work with the Nature Trust of New Brunswick. We're a land trust in the province, and our, I guess the equivalents across in Atlantic Canada to us are the Island Nature Trust and PEI and the Nova Scotia Nature Trust. Now, I guess our interest, principally because we are major landowners in the coastal area, has to do with sort of impacts on existing properties. A lot of these are islands as well as coastal salt marshes. And just to give you an anecdote, I guess we were about 4 years ago sitting around with our colleagues from the Nature Conservancy and identifying priority areas for purchase on the coast. And a guy from Environment Canada said, "Oh, wait," and he ran out of the room and he came back with a CD that had sea level rise modeled on it, over top of basically contours on the map. And after we all saw that, we kind of started picking properties that were on the other side of the road, you know, for priority conservation. And so I guess you know, that kind of nobody